Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I am your host, Carrie Roberts, and today my guest is Lauren Krasnodembski. I am so excited you're here. We met through a mutual person that we both know through the publishing world, and I'm excited to have you here to chat about your life and your new book.
Thanks so much, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so we're talking about this idea of kind of reclaiming your power. And I always like to start kind of in the very beginning. So when you were young, and maybe it's, whether it was a kid or a teenager or a young adult, what was kind of in your mind when you thought of having a successful life? What did that look like when you were younger, did you think?
Well, it's interesting because when I was younger, I probably didn't give a lot of thought to these these things until I kind of made it, if you will, in life and became successful by societal standards. Uh, my childhood was a little bit different. I was very like a white privileged child. My dad was a doctor, and then he got a brain tumor, and he was not supposed to live through his surgery. And so that kind of really woke me up in probably not a good way. Like for my sister, she kind of took it as like, oh my gosh, every we all live once, took YOLO to heart. And I, on the other hand, it like kind of almost sent me down this like fear route unconsciously, where I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to need a lot of money to be prepared in life. And so I was like, what's going to make me the most money? And it sent me down kind of law school without really thinking about like, well, what is it that I like to do? And as kids, like we're not really taught how to capitalize on our strengths or really pair our interests with, what we should be doing in life and how we can truly give back to others. So it was kind of, I started to make really a lot of unconscious decisions that led me to really where I was supposed to go, but then kind of had this oh shit moment where I really had to like think about, I really need to reclaim my power and figure out how I'm showing up in life and how I want to show up in life.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, you talk about it being kind of unconscious. For some people, it's the pressure that maybe they feel from parents or society, or sometimes, as you mentioned, it's an incident and it affects everybody differently. And I'm a huge Oprah fan. She always talks about how kind of life whispers to you. It's like and then it kind of escalates. Did you find, before you got to that oh crap moment, were there certain things that you were kind of feeling or sensing or hearing that felt like something feels off or something doesn't feel right for my life?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I saw how you were writing about basically that like the universe is constantly leaving us signs. And one of my chapters in my book called Reclaim Your Power is called Breadcrumbs, because yeah, I believe that constantly the universe is leaving us breadcrumbs, kind of leading us where we're supposed to go. And it's our job to kind of make our plate. Like, what does it look like? Because sometimes these breadcrumbs don't look like anything. But in reality, they really mean stuff. And it's your job to wake up and pay attention to them.
So can you share maybe some of the ones that you heard or felt or noticed early on?
Yeah. So throughout my career, I was always like being asked to do like personality tests.
Oh, can I say I hate those on a side note?
So this is good. This is where we differ. So they like light me up. I don't know why. I'm fascinated reading about them, not just for myself, but like, I want to know what you are.
Right.
And I literally couldn't put it down. And like, I hate reading. So the fact that like I enjoyed reading like this content, like I should have been paying attention to that. Like, why does this intrigue me? Right. In the fact that like I really love learning about other people and how the mind works and why that fascinates me, but I just like shoved it in a door because I was too busy doing my real job, that I didn't take it anywhere for a really long time. But that's a great example of how things are placed in your path, and if they fascinate you or if they bring you energy, like it was literally bringing me energy to read. And like I said, I hate to read, so that was a breadcrumb.
It's funny because I too, obviously through the podcast as well, I love talking to people. I have a psychology, but I always found that the personality tests were interesting at first, but then other people would put you in a box. And I never really liked that feeling of like, oh, you're this way. So this is my assumption of you. And I was like, wait, I'm more than just than just this one thing. So it's interesting. But for you, as you said, maybe taking that moment to be like, wait, I'm not sure. And, I think one of the things I was reading that you talk about is people ask, what are you passionate about? Or another word is like, well, what do you want to do if you could do anything? And there are a lot of people that are like, I have no idea. And they have that feeling throughout their life. Can you talk about when people asked you that question, how you felt, and maybe this kind of, oh crap moment, and where that led you?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely that person that didn't know and that you just described. And what I did was I just started really trying to understand what brought me energy and what depleted it. And I did this really simply by literally making a T chart on a piece of paper and carrying it around for like 7 days straight. Sometimes I did it longer for like a month, and it wouldn't be like a thing that I did. It was just like, hey, as I was doing stuff, if it was bringing me energy, I was having a really good time doing it, or I was entrenched in it, just really lost time, I would write it down that it was bringing me energy. And same for depleting my energy. And I began to see patterns. And so it's not like one day, even though I did set out to be like, what am I passionate about? It was actually when I stopped looking for it, like when I was just like, I am passionate about just how I show up for people in my life and who I meet, that my passions really actually started to find me. It was like the moment I surrendered to having something that it really did find me.
Can you share maybe what was on that T list? Like what was on the things that you realized gave you energy and ones that didn't?
Yeah, like I also love meeting new people. Like I love striking conversations with strangers and learning more about them. I love, like, everybody has a story, and everybody's story is fascinating. And we can learn so much from each other. And it makes us realize that like we're not alone, that people are having the same feelings. And so I love that. I love being busy because I'm more of a type A person. So, when I had a full schedule, it like made me happy, not because I couldn't sit, because that was part of my process, is really, sitting with myself, sitting with my feelings, understanding what was coming up for me. But I generally like being, a productive member of society. So it brings me joy to do that.
And what was on the side of stuff that you were like, this is not it?
Well, it's funny, writing, even though I wrote a book. But here's the thing. And same with reading. Like I did not read books for most of my life. And now I'm like an avid reader. And so understanding that things can change about yourself over time if you allow it. Not because you want to be a certain way, but maybe you just haven't found what sparks your interest. So like I was writing about things I didn't like. So once I kind of found my niche, it was just like, oh my gosh, floodgates open. I have to share this with the world. So I think it's a great example of like, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, if a couple years ago, somebody told me that you're going to be an author, I would have laughed in their face.
It's interesting because I think like, all of us, I journal a lot, and we all kind of go on this journey of like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do next? Maybe we have something for a while and then it adjusts and we're not sure. And as you mentioned, sometimes you're looking for this like answer. You're like, somebody just tell me what it is. But it is kind of this whole process. And you mentioned, kind of being in that pause and that breath. And a lot of people are busy. They say, well, I don't have time, to stop and relax or think or whatever. How did you kind of find those moments to relax, and how did that bring you value into being able to really kind of find the things that you were excited about?
Well, it's practice. It's why I created the mind muscle motivator, because it takes practice to really exercise your mind to allow you to slow down. Because like we're wired to just go, 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 produce, 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 and it took I hated yoga. And meditation is still like an active thing that I have to like try hard at, because it's not something that comes naturally to just sit and be. But it really, I like to say, like, sometimes slowing down helps you speed back up, because oftentimes if you're in this go, go, go frenzy, you're not even taking time to acknowledge maybe what feelings you have, or even paying attention to where your energy is steering you. You might be overcommitting yourself. And I did this all the time, where I was overcommitting myself to all these yeses, and not saying no for like my true heck yes, like this is what I'm doing. So it's it's been a powerful thing to allow myself to really slow down and exercise, like really paying attention to like what my thoughts are in a given day or in a given hour, because that'll fluctuate in the given minute. And honing in on that and not allowing them to go down the rabbit hole. And that pause allows me to kind of like settle into my body. So really that mind muscle connection into your body, that your feelings are very powerful, and listening to those, because that is a form of energy. So if you're feeling off when you're in a situation, that's probably your body's probably trying to communicate something to you.
And I think there's a lot of people that, nobody likes to feel not as good feelings, right? We all want to have this euphoric, wonderful time,
Mhm.
but life is a journey and we have ups and downs and different moments. There are times that people will say, well, I don't want to feel any of this, so I'm going to ignore it, or I'm going to do something that makes it go away, but they end up keep coming up. So is there anything that you did or you recommend when somebody's sitting with those in the silence and they're not so great feelings, or it feels like something is off, to kind of get through or handle those moments?
I would just say allowing yourself to be. Oftentimes when I just surrender to the fact of like whatever it is, like it's there, right? It's there for a reason. And like you said, things gonna continue to come in your path until you learn the lesson. Like there was this quote that I heard in school, you learn the lesson and take the test. But in life, that's actually you take the test, and then if you're lucky, you get to learn the lesson. And when I think about that, it's just like fascinating. When you see patterns in your life like that, pay attention, because they're there in your path for a reason.
Yeah, like you said, both good and bad, right? Like it's like really noticing what's bringing me energy, what's working, what's not, what keeps
Yeah.
happening, what do I kind of need to adjust. So as you decide to kind of write this book, what are maybe like 2 or 3 steps that you would say people should start taking to really kind of start noticing and reclaiming their power and who they are and the things that they want?
Yeah, I think step one is just to really understand who you are. I mean, I remember when I was asked the question, what are you passionate about? I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. And then she's like, well, what do you like doing? And honestly, it was the first time that I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've like lost myself through this process that we call life, because again, I was so busy just doing, I wasn't even thinking, well, who am I? Aside from like the labels, of a mom and an attorney and a wife, like
Yeah.
who really am I? So I think everybody should have their own like I am affirmation or mantra that they come up for themselves. And like that's something that I live by. So all my actions in a day, can be reverted back to my I am statement, which is I am a passionate, powerful, present, and peaceful leader. So I have a great I am exercise on my website that you can grab if you're interested in creating your own, but it really helps me live my life more intentionally with who I am and what I value. So
Yeah, I think well, and it's, I mean, I'm sure you know this, right? Like we are what we think, what we feel, and sometimes, I was just talking about this with someone the other day, that when we speak things, you don't realize the things you're saying, like you're like, "Oh, that's actually what I believe." And to
mhm.
start kind of changing the way you want to maybe feel or live your life. And I like how you kind of added, peaceful in there as well, because as you said, you're kind of very go go go, but now it's become a part of who you are and who you want it to be. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was not a passionate person and I was far from a peaceful person.
It's like in those moments when you're like chaotic, you're like, I am peaceful. Like try to like bring it back. I've had those moments as well. So
Yeah.
after you're kind of going through this is kind of the first step. And I always kind of, when we're on this show, when people are talking, it's not a step that's like, okay, I've done it in 10 minutes and it's done and I'm ready to move on, right? It's a continuous thing, that does take time to really build and continue to be a part of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's step one, because that helped with my confidence, in my like imposter syndrome, to have this like I am statement and
Mhm.
mantra that I repeated. But really what I think helps, and this is true, like I still do this today, like when I get in ruts, or maybe even if things are going well and I want to see what's working well, is I'll go back to that T chart, and try to understand what's going up here in my mind, because so often we're moving so quickly that we're not even making, again, that mind body connection of what's even going on. I remember when I hired my first life coach, like, to be honest, like I didn't even realize the chatter that was going on upstairs. She's like, I think all of your thoughts are like very negative, and I'm like, oh, maybe. So just even having that connection, that time to really understand like what is going through your mind, or, what are you feeling, to just see what's coming up. And then from there, once you start to assess some of your patterns, pick something that you want to work on. If you're feeling anxious, maybe it is setting 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. I mean, I'll tell you, at the height, like I call them my dark days, where I was just so stressed and so overwhelmed with work and the kids and just like everything that like taking care of family and just everything. I was like, I was serving nobody. I know this is a cliche, like fill up your cup first, but like
Mhm.
it is true, man, because when you feel good about yourself, it's like you're naturally overpouring, and you have to be mindful of what's in your cup, because your cup can be full, but it might not be full with stuff you need in it. And that's where I found myself, where like I was like my cup was very full, but I none of what was in my cup was working for me. So really paying attention to like what you need, what you're desiring, and if you're not sure, like pay attention to what's around you. Like, are you finding yourself like looking at somebody in awe, like, I wish I could be like her? Well, what qualities do they have or that person have? Or maybe you're jealous of somebody. Use that as clues, or like resentment. Like, I know I was resentful for my mom at a little bit of time where I wanted to not work and she didn't work. I didn't make the connection, but I was resentful towards her, and I didn't even realize why until I really sat back and was like, oh, I want some more free time. So really
Yeah,
powerful.
I think you're right. It's not only noticing it, but then it's like, why am I feeling the way? Or maybe what is it triggering, or getting a little bit of that deeper layer. And like you just said, it was about the free time. And then it goes
Mhm,
into, well, how can I create more free time in my life? And then it starts to become a little bit easier. But I do think a lot of times people, we all do, at some point just get stuck, and you're
mhm,
like, something's not working, but you can't
yeah.
really put your finger on it. And so what's kind of the maybe next step you would say that people take here?
I would say, like, when you feel stuck, like, to start learning. Oftentimes, when we feel stuck, it's like we're not we're dead. Like, we're not moving in
Mhm.
any direction. It's just we're stagnant. So whether that's picking up something that's inspiring to you, whether that's reading a book, whether that's jumping on and listening to your podcast, somebody else talk, whether it's reading a quote, whether it's helping somebody else that day, like if you're feeling down, whatever. Find the things that, like, again, it goes back to the energy. What bring you energy? What lights you up? And like getting back to those things, because I think once you are in that space of feeling good, you're naturally vibrating higher and things start attracting to you.
And I think I was reading too something you were talking about. We're all kind of wired in a lot of ways. I would say, especially in the United States, about achievements and having things, or having money, or having things
Mhm.
have a purpose. But there is this element, I think, about doing things because it brings you joy. And it doesn't mean that you get an award for it or that it brings in money, but you do it because it makes you feel good. And I don't think we talk about that a lot. Is there something that you have found for yourself that just brings you joy, that doesn't have any of those attachments? It's just for you and just your emotional wellness.
Yeah, like now that the book's written, I started the Mind Muscle Motivator account just to keep, like as things like channel through me and I get inspiration, I just share it back to the world, or if I come up with like a cool example of recently, like for Valentine's Day, my husband like got me like a beautiful bouquet of flowers, but 3 years ago he got me these flowers that died in a day. And I was like, I don't want these flowers. And, it just came to me like, ask for what you want. Like, I did not want those flowers. And it sounds, ungrateful, right? You're supposed to be grateful for what you get and have. And that's true, you are, but you can still ask for what you want at the same time. And so it was like a great, just as things come to me, I just, share them back as like little reminders, because I need the reminders. I swear. I read my own book just to be like, oh, yeah, go back and do that.
I do that too. It's funny because I do sometimes, like, it's like social posts, and it's like you need to remind yourself,
Yes.
you're like, oh yeah, that's, just put that down for later.
Yeah.
I totally
100%.
resonate with that. So is there any suggestions for people in terms of, they're saying, okay, I am doing everything that maybe you said, but I'm just feeling, it's still like it's just not working. Maybe it's their job, maybe it's, their family, maybe it's their hobbies. what's something that either helped you or you would suggest people can do to kind of like get out of their comfort zone and kind of try something else to find that thing that maybe excites them and gives them their power back?
Well, I think you just answered the question. You get out of your comfort zone and try something new. I mean, if something's not working, right, and you're trying things, sometimes it is just a matter of going to a different workout class, or
Yep.
meeting somebody that you've never met for coffee, or just again doing something outside of your comfort zone, outside of your box, because that is oftentimes where things beyond your wildest imagination live.
Yeah. So what is your, now that you have been through this process and you continue to go through it, what is the next step for you and something that you would like to do for yourself in continuing to claim your power and live your life for you?
Well, for me, so every year on my birthday for the last several years, I'm like dedicated to my own personal development and growth.
Mhm.
Because that's the way I give back to others, is if I keep growing. So I signed up for a 3-day online retreat, which is going to teach me how to build my own retreats. Cause I just like love, I want to build a community of women and have them come to these retreats where they can kind of detox and relax, but also learn awesome tools and techniques that they can take home with them to really help ground them and reclaim their own power, whatever that looks like for them.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's when you start, like you said, seeing people do other things that you like, learning from them, how do they do it, and then creating it in your own way, is amazing. So again, I congratulate you on kind of your own growth and doing this book and those next steps. If people want to get the book, they want to learn more about you or anything we talked about, where's the best place to do that?
So you can grab the book Reclaim Your Power on Amazon.com. That's probably the quickest way to get to your house. There's also on Barnes and Nobles, and the audiobook will be ready this summer. And you can learn more about me at mindmusclemotivator.com.
Perfect. And the last question I like to ask all of my guests, Lauren, is what is one word or quote or mantra that you try to live by every single day?
Probably my I am affirmation, which is I am a passionate, powerful, present, and peaceful leader who is whole and complete and an instrument of divine light and love.
I love it. Beautiful. Well, I thank you, Lauren. It's so wonderful to have you here. And like I said, hear about your growth and how you're continuing to inspire others by working on yourself. So thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here.
Thanks so much for having me and for being awesome and having so many awesome people on this podcast.
Thank you.